begin that passage? Or Gwen, you go first. That's right. Okay, Gwen. You lean into your mic and read for us.
Yep. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. This is Numbers chapter 13, all of 13 through 14:5. I'll be reading the first third, roughly. The Lord said to Moses, "Send the men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders." So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and on into the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where the descendants of Anak lived. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. Two of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land.
They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev, the Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan." Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them."
That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt, or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt." Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan and Gwen and Amanda, for reading that for us. If you haven't picked up, a theme in this passage from Numbers has to do with courage or the lack of courage. And so today we're going to read another passage. Our New Testament passage comes from 2 Timothy. And I'm going to ask, let me make sure I can unmute the Giacomettis here. Sorry.
I think I'm unmuted.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Good. And let me pull up that screen so people can see the passage that we have to read. Okay, one moment. This is a lot of stuff here. Okay. There we go. Okay. Isaac, if you'd like to read that for us.
2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline.
Thank you. It's powerful. You know, the role that courage plays in our life is something we may not talk too much about, the virtue of being courageous. But it's a powerful piece of religious life, spiritual life. Sorry, distracted by household things here. I want to start with a picture of what courage looks like, the opposite of cowardice. This is a woman who embodied the spirit of courage for us. Somebody's still muted. I'm sorry, someone's not muted. We're getting. Could everyone check that their mics are muted? We're hearing, I think, television from someone's house. Okay, there we go. So this is Gladys Aylward. She was born in 1902 in London, in a working class family, pretty poor. And from a young age, she was certain that she wanted to be a missionary in the China Inland Mission. But when she was about 26, she went to training school to be a missionary. And after 3 months, her instructor told her that it was no good. It was a waste of time and money. She didn't have what was required kind of intellectually or by her character to be a missionary in China. She would never learn the language, she said. But God opened the doors for her, and she ended up going. When she was 30 years old, she ended up buying a one-way ticket to Yancheng, China, because an elderly missionary there, Jeannie Lawson, needed an assistant. So Gladys went, and when she was there, she earned a reputation as being called the Little Woman. You can read about her in this book that's there by Christine Hunter, or with Christine Hunter, of her adventures as being a missionary in China. But I'd like to share with you one episode from her life that comes from a book, Hero Tales by Dave and Metta Jackson. And it tells a little bit about what it means to walk in the courage of the Lord. I'll give you a couple pictures to look at as I read this story to you. Someone was pounding at the gate of the Inn of Seven Happinesses. That was an inn that she helped run for mule train drivers. And Gladys was awakened and commanded to come out to meet the governor of the province. He was standing there along with the governor of the local prison. And Gladys followed them out into the courtyard, and she heard sounds, screams coming from the local prison. It sounded like a riot inside. She was confused, and she bowed before the governor and asked why had they sent for her. They said, "Come quick, you must go in and stop the riot." Gladys, who had the reputation as the little woman, asked, "Why me? Why don't you send in your soldiers?" "That's impossible," the governor cried. "These prisoners are murderers and thieves, soldiers who would certainly be killed." But Gladys protested, "If I went in there, they would kill me." "Oh no," said the governor. "You tell our people that God lives inside you. And if what you say is true, then surely your God will protect you when you go inside the prison." Gladys stared at the two men. Were they making fun of her? No, they were serious. And she realized that if she did not believe that God would protect her, then she could forget about being a missionary in China. So she swallowed hard. Right away, she said slowly, "Open the gate." I'm going to just pause for a minute. If someone has a television on, would you make sure
Barbara,
that your
it's
mic is on?
Barbara. You should be able to mute Barbara from your side there, Greg.
Yeah, okay, I do it, just a pain. Here, step out.
The World Health Organization has suggested an adequate test. Be able to mute. Shouldn't you be able to mute everyone else?
I think that did it. Yeah, maybe I'll just continue like this. I'll pull up one more photo of this little woman for you to see. So she goes in, she swallows hard, she opens the gate of the prison, she walks in, and inside the prison courtyard, there's a horrible sight. Prisoners chasing each other with knives and screaming like madmen. Dead and wounded prisoners are lying everywhere. Running straight towards her was a huge man holding an axe over his head. And Gladys was so terrified she couldn't move. But when the man was only a few feet away, he stopped suddenly. And one by one, the other prisoners stopped yelling and running and just looked at her. Who was this short little woman? What was she doing here? And then suddenly Gladys got mad. The man with the axe was just a big bully. Give me that axe, she demanded, holding out her hand. And without a word, the man handed her the axe. Gladys looked at the prisoners. They were dressed in dirty rags. They were so thin that their ribs showed. They looked cold and miserable, and suddenly, instead of being afraid of them, she felt sorry for them. She said, I've been sent in by the governor of the prison to find out why you're fighting. And at first, no one spoke. And then the young prisoner came forward and he said, we don't know why we're fighting, but we're hungry and we have nothing to do day after day. And Gladys frowned. These men had been locked up like animals without enough food and no work to keep them busy. She turned to the men and said, if you promise to stop fighting, if you will bury the dead and take care of those who are wounded, then I will speak to the governor for you. The prisoners agreed. And as Gladys stepped out of the prison, the city officials bowed to her with respect, and she told the governor of the prison that the men needed to have work to do so they could earn money and buy food and have self-respect, and that she, Gladys, was going to come back and visit the prison every day to make sure that it happened. Well, it's a pretty amazing story. This little woman who embodies this passage that we read from 2 Timothy. God has not given us a spirit of cowardice, but of power and love and self-discipline. What does that look like? I'm going to spend a little bit of time in the book of Numbers that we had read for us to just name a couple of things that this. Courage, we know, is not the absence of fear. In fact, courage only makes sense in the presence of fear, because courage is the resolve to move forward even when you're terrified. Those who know no fear at all might be foolhardy, but they're not courageous. And we also know that courage is not looking just through rose-colored glasses rather, and seeing things all rosy and sunny. No, courage is assessing things exactly as they are. Courage, we might say, is this. Here's a definition for you. That courage is doing the thing that we knew to do, that is moving forward into a new territory, whether that territory is like a new promised land like the Hebrews, or into a prison riot like Gladys did, or perhaps for us closer to hand might be moving into new territory relationally with our spouses, our children, or co-workers. Moving into that territory, being led by God to do so with the confidence that God goes with us. Means moving into the territory that God calls us to with the confidence that God will go with us. Now, when we look at Numbers, there's a couple things, and I'll just name them pretty briefly. But the first thing to do is to see what's going on. Take a good, clear look at the challenge. That's why Moses gathered the spies together and he said, go and look and see what it's like. What is this land like? How is the soil? What's the fruit like there? What are the people like? Are there many or there few? How about their cities? Are they fortified or wide open? Tell us about this land and come back and let us know what it is. Taking a good look at the challenge. I know often when I'm afraid of something, I don't look at it clearly. In fact, I kind of avoid looking at it clearly for fear of what I might see. The first thing we do, and we might need help in this, is to kind of scope it out and take a clear and honest look. And the second thing to do, and this is pretty difficult, but it's to accept the situation exactly as it is. Now, when the spies came back, they made a report. It was a pretty decent report. They said, we went to the land that you sent us, and it flows with milk and honey, and here's some fruit, some great fruit, but the people are powerful, and the cities are fortified. And we saw some of the folks who were there, the Amalekites who live in the Negev, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, they live along the shore. That's exactly how things are. Now, it's difficult to accept the situation exactly as it is because we prefer the situation to be as we want it to be. Some of us have a habit of seeing the trouble with a situation and exaggerating those problems. Others of us have a habit of seeing only the possibilities and negating what the challenges and difficulties might be. But learning to, with calmness, accept the situation exactly as it is. That's the second thing. And the third thing we need to do is to focus on the knowns, not on our fears. Focus on what is known, not on what we fear or don't know. If you remember the passage being read for us, it said 10 of the spies were frightened. Joshua and Caleb said, let's go forward. I think we can do this. 10 of the spies were frightened. They said, we look like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And then they went beyond the situation as they could know it. And they said, we even look like grasshoppers to them. Now, I don't think they could know that. I don't think they asked the opinion of the occupants what they thought of them. I'm sure they stayed hidden. But they exaggerated, they focused on their fears rather than what was known. The challenge for us as we face challenging situations that call for courage, is to take a good look at and reaffirm not what we're afraid of, but what we know. Not to focus on the ones that are against us, but on who we know stands with us. Not on the problem or predicament that we confront, but rather the promises of God. Not on our ability or our inability to shape the world as we want it, but rather on the certainty that God holds the whole world in his hands, not on our strength or resources, but the certainty that the God who calls us to move forward moves with us. And that's the final step. It's kind of the secret recipe to make this happen. It's the assurance of this, to move forward with the confidence that God goes with us. You know, it took the Israelites 40 years to recover from that moment. Because the spies were frightened, because they spread terrible stories among the people and stirred up fear among the people, they had to wait another 40 years before entering the promised land, a time in which all of the generation would pass on and their children would be the ones to inherit the promised land. But Joshua was one to lead the charge into that promised land. And he's told these instructions multiple times, both at the end of Deuteronomy and at the beginning of Joshua. His instruction before going into the promised land is this: only be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Don't be discouraged, because your Lord, the God, will go with you. Know that God goes with you. He said, don't be afraid, only be strong and courageous, and be sure of this, that God goes with you. Let me share the screen again and pull this up so too as, there we go. So we take a clear look at the challenge, understand it, get the information we need to know about what's going on, accept the situation as it is, exactly, not as we wish it to be. Focus on the things that we know, don't exaggerate the fears, and finally, know that God goes with us. I want to end with short little profiles of some folks in our time. These are people that are neighbors in our country, not in our town, but who are exhibiting courage in this time of pandemic. These come from Time magazine. You could go online and read about them. The first one here is Danny Iberia Ramirez. He's a 30-year-old our emergency room nurse in the south side of Chicago. He says this: I'm not going to lie. Early last week, when the order of quarantine was first sent into effect here in Illinois, there was a moment that I was lying on my couch. I was crippled with anxiety. I couldn't move. But otherwise, I know that this is my duty, especially working in the ER. I know I had signed up for the unknown. And there are a lot of reasons to fear right now, but fear has never helped me. It just gets in the way of being reasonable and rational. As scary as this is, other people are relying on us. We have to support each other to remain hopeful and optimistic. There's another woman from Livonia, Michigan. She's a certified nursing assistant in a nursing home, Kenya Blackburn. And she says this: when I was first started off doing this job, I was about 19. I was so exciting because I was helping somebody, and they were always happy to see me. They made me happy, and I loved it. But so much has changed because of this pandemic. It's so much more stressful. We've always been short on staffing, but now we're really short because so many of the workers are very scared. I usually care for about 17 residents during the shift, but now I'm caring for about 25 at a time in the isolated units for residents with fevers. You don't know what you're going to bring home to your family. I have 2 children, 16 and 18, and a 1-year-old grandbaby. I worry about them all the time. And then there's my mom. I'm her only child. So it's a big scare because, look, who's going to take care of her? It's very scary for the family. They don't want me to go back to work, but I have to go. That's how I provide for my family, but I also tell them that the residents need me there. For us to see the patients that we take care of for years get sick, that's heartbreaking. We face the residents, the ones that are sick. We try to keep them, keep them straight. We look them right in the face. I know this is the biggest challenge I have. I don't know if they're going to die, or I don't know if they'll ever see their families again, but I try to keep their spirits up and I pray with them. A remarkable thing for these folks to be sharing of their own fear, their own vulnerability, moving into a situation with a lot of unknowns, a lot of opportunities to be afraid. Now, I don't think any of us are going to be called on this week to face a madman with an axe in a prison. Some of us may be called to move into situations where we're not sure about the presence of the coronavirus and whether we're carrying that virus back home to people we love or to vulnerable ones in our community. But I do know this, that all of us have things in our life right now, chances are relational things, conversations that we're not having, confrontations that we're avoiding, expressions of feeling that we're not taking an opportunity to share. And I wonder for you, what territory is it that God is calling you to move into without fear, but with courage? Well, perhaps courage in the face of fear. Going with the confidence that where God calls you to move, so he will accompany you, and be confident that God will lead the way. So look at it clearly, accept it as it is, focus not on the fears, but on the things that you do know, and be assured of this: whatever new territory you're moving into, the God who calls you is faithful and moves with you. Let's pray. God, thank you for the confidence that we have that you call us to go nowhere apart from your presence, and that the future, whatever it holds, also we can be assured comes with your presence with us. We pray that we would be mindful of your presence, that we would resist those voices of fear that threaten at times to take over, and that we could move with calmness and your spirit, a spirit not of cowardice, but of power and love and self-discipline. We pray this so that we can know the fullness of life, freedom that you call us to, and so shine as your people in this world. Amen. We're going to go to our final closing hymn. At the end of that, I'll unmute everybody and we can greet each other and say our goodbyes to one another. Right now, I'll pull up that hymn.